Welcome to the Sales SOS podcast, where we answer your sales distress calls. I'm Liz Heiman, and each week I'm joined by your crew of seasoned sales experts who have navigated these waters and come out victorious. So if you're ready to turn your sales distress into sales success, you're in the right place. Let's dive into today's topic. Welcome, everyone, to the Sales SOS podcast. I'm Liz Heiman, and I am here with your Sales SOS podcast crew, Renee Bigelow, Brynne Tillman, Mike Simmons, Darryl Praill, and Chris Bowen. And if you want to know more about the crew, you can go and find information about them on our Sales SOS podcast.com website. Okay, so we are talking about building internal teams for sales success. And I think in order to do that, we have to really understand, what do salespeople do? I think it's a big mystery for most people what salespeople do all day. And I think for some salespeople, it's actually a mystery what they're supposed to be doing all day. But let's jump in. And before we do that, I want to remind everybody there are a lot of different kinds of salespeople. So there are, we have this word that SDR or development, right? So these are people who dial all day long or send emails all day long. And then there are sales executives who manage large accounts from start to finish. And there are sales development reps. What's the word I want? Business development reps, who sometimes go all the way from the developing the business to closing the business. We have channel sales leaders, managers who are often in a sales role, and we have account managers who grow accounts. These are all different sales roles. So what those people do every day is really different. So we say, what does a salesperson do? I have threatened many times that when somebody from another department complains about sales, that they should go for a week and follow the salespeople around or sit next to the salespeople. And then once they understand what that salesperson does, they can have a different conversation about what do salespeople really do? What do salespeople really do? And are they doing anything? We are having echo. Okay. All right. So who wants to start? Mike, I think you should start, because I think you're the one that's feeling most passionate about this. In our last conversation, where we're talking about what meetings should salespeople be going to or not going to. So why don't you start and talk to us about the day in the life of a salesperson?
Well, I think the key piece is knowing what your two numbers are. And for me, there's really two numbers. We can go into a third, but the two numbers for me are pipeline created, pipeline developed. What are we putting new at the top? New could be new, net new, it could be add-on, but what are we contributing that's new at the top? And what are we, of the stuff that we've put in, what are we developing? What's actually moving forward? How's it moving through each of those stages? If you're doing anything in your role that does not contribute to pipeline being created or pipeline being developed, then you have to ask yourself, why am I here? What am I doing? And that becomes a pretty clear set of criteria to you, or a clear way for you to kind of determine, am I doing the right things? Am I doing the right things in the right order? If your pipeline's is being created and it's growing, then good. On that side, if it's developing, then good. Developing means developing out, and things are moved to closed loss as much as they're moved to closed won. But there you can start to go through and say, what work is working? And if you ever find yourself doing work that isn't working, then be really comfortable firing that work and stopping it. And you can use the data to help inform it. As far as what the specific things are that you do to do it, going across the number of people that I've been fortunate enough to work with and coach and develop, everybody does it differently. Like, there's just different ways that you can go about doing different things inside the market that work for you. So the key piece is figuring out what works best for you to drive those two metrics. The third metric, which is further out are things like revenue performance versus plan, or sales performance versus plan. Those are further out numbers. But from a day-to-day perspective, what did I add at the top? What did I move forward?
So those are great metrics, and I want to keep moving in that direction. But I think it's really important to dig into the details.
Okay.
What does that actually look like? What does it actually feel like? And I'm going to try this for a second. So one of the things that I talk about often with my clients is, what is the salesperson actually doing? Like, here's the first thing. What does it feel like to be in sales? Sales is one of the few jobs, and I'm not going to say there aren't any others, but they're one of the few jobs that 90% of the high level work that we do turns into absolutely nothing, right? So if 10% of the conversations that you have to actually turn into deals, then 90% of the conversations that you had go nowhere. That is a discouraging feeling just from the beginning. The other thing, when we start thinking about the life of a salesperson, other than the CEO, most other people in a company get paid what they get paid, and they might get a bonus. And their livelihood, their income isn't performance based. Maybe they'll get fired if they don't deliver what they're supposed to deliver, but they know what they're getting paid until the day they get fired. With a salesperson who's on commission, they never know. So when we wonder, why are they stressed out? Why are they all jacked up? Why are they this or that? Like, why are they cramming the sale down our throat when it's not really a good fit? Well, if you want to understand what drives a salesperson, if they don't know if their bills are going to get paid or not, and they need this deal to pay their bills, that tells you something about the life of a salesperson and why they behave the way they behave. And I think we need to talk more about those kinds of things. What do they do all day? What is it like to be an SDR? To dial 50 or 100 dials a day and get hung up on 90% of the time? Like, what is this really like? And I'm not saying that people who are in sales don't love it. I just also know it can be soul crushing. So I'm throwing it back out to you guys. What is the day in the life of a salesperson?
Is it a salesperson, or is it a high performing salesperson?
I'd really like the role of a high performing salesperson.
So if I'm just going to say a little bit around this again, very myopically focused in the social selling world. I really believe that everything that you do needs to have a purpose. Random acts of selling can kill any pipeline. Random acts of selling can kill any activity, right? And having a very productive process in place is critical. Knowing what to do, when to do it, whether you have a gong or a sales loft that's helping you with that, or your CRM is positioned to help you get through that process. I do believe a repeatable, scalable process is the key to a very successful salesperson long term. Otherwise, they will find all the activity that's more fun to do, not necessarily productive. The other piece is, I do believe that it needs to be, everything needs to be completely integrated together. When I'm listening to folks that say time block, time block, time block, it never happens, because they time block and then they get a phone call and then this happens. And then they do everything they can to avoid the activity that actually is productive. So when the successful activity is cohesive, and it's all part of, like, look at your day, and before you meet with a client, what are you doing for your pre-call planning? And then it's like 3 minutes here and 5 minutes there. I mean, that's my social selling piece, but it has to all be part of the day. If we get into, we need to time block, what I have found time and time again is then it just doesn't happen, because people are like, well, I don't have the time to invest in this because I'm doing what I'd rather be doing. So that's just my thought.
And what are the things they don't like doing usually? And what are the things they do like doing usually?
So, I mean, from my experience, which, they don't necessarily like the top of the pipeline prospecting. They want to do the fun things. And I get it. I understand, that they want to do the stuff that makes them feel good. And, I'm going to get the phrase wrong, but it's like eat the frog, like do all the things in the morning. That's time blocking. And I believe that ends up, maybe that works for a couple of weeks, but people start to go like, I don't want to eat. I get nauseous early in the morning and I don't want to eat the frog early in the morning. But what if, right, you just eat a little bite of the frog cold take, well, that sounds so gross. But like, it's just all integrated into your day. Like my prospecting, I'll look and I'm like, okay, I had 3 client calls today and I'm going to identify who they know that I want to meet. And if the opportunity is right, I'm going to ask for introduction. And so that's integrated into my day. So I think when you integrate those things instead of saying, okay, for 1 hour, you've got to call 50 people, whatever that looks like, I just feel like that fails long term. Now, I'm going to back up and say, if you're an SDR, that's your job. That's different, right? Like if that is the job of, someone who is an appointment setter, then that's what everything is time blocked like that, right? But if you are someone who is in a business development role where you are wearing many hats in that process, I think time blocking or time to eat the frog just dines out pretty quickly. And that's just my experience.
Liz, can I say that you set up a really great example of the different types of AEs, but I think there's one subset maybe that is really important to point out, especially if we're talking about what does a day look like. There are many people in those roles who never leave the office. And then there are many people in all of those roles that you pointed out, all of them, that never go to the office because they're traveling to go see accounts on a regular basis. And I think that is a huge distinction for what does a day of a high-performing salesperson look like. There's those who travel and those who don't, or those who live in between those two things.
And I can tell you that one time, many years ago when I was working at Miller Heiman and I was in an office all the time and I was traveling to Asia once a quarter and I was also training. So I was out 2 days a week this week and 2 days a week that week. And I had been in Asia for, 10 days. And I got back and I said, I'm home if somebody needs something, but I'm not coming in until tomorrow. And somebody said to me, you've just been out vacationing. Like their perception was I was traveling. You were just out traveling and now you're not going to come to work. What a life you have. Like, yeah. I won't tell you how many times during that trip I opened my eyes in the middle of the night and said, what hotel, what town, what city, what country, where's the door, where's the window, right?
Well, I bring up the travel piece because your days differ depending on, if you're traveling or not, but that also connects to Brynne's point. If you're thinking about, even if I'm traveling, how do I get this integrated in? Even, if I'm traveling some days and not some days, like I think it kind of was a good point to bring that out, following how you laid out the different roles. And Brynne was talking about trying to integrate the important things in a day. Though I do think, Brynne, I will say, time blocking for new behavior is often really good to build muscle memory. When this is something new, setting aside some time to build that muscle memory is a good idea. But if you're traveling, that could be an impossible thing to do. So that's why I brought attention to that.
And that's true. I think different roles. I hear myself going. But that's why I think different roles have different responsibilities. Like if you, and I do think you need to get muscle memory maybe for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but then integrate it in, right? Then make sure, because I just have found that, even for me, I'm going to write original content at this time. But then I have a client proposal, and that's going to take precedence over that content. And then I have, a networking call with Liz, and I'd rather do that than write. Right. And so what happens is when you have an hour that you have to focus on it feels overwhelming. But if it's integrated 3 to 5 minutes throughout your day, all of a sudden there's an hour or 2 of that activity that happened naturally without the dread.
So I can offer a few observations in the terms of what is a day in the life of a high performing salesperson? It's going to vary. All right. Every person's got their own style. Do I prospect in the morning or I prospect in the afternoon, whatever. But I can share some attributes that I've seen repeatedly over the years, and I would love to see the reaction, especially on Mike in this one, is I see a high-performing sales rep is focused, like extremely focused, and they know exactly what they need. So they may be focused on prospecting for a period of time, a couple hours, because they know if they don't do X number of dials or emails or social touches or whatever today, that they're not going to eat in 3 months' time because our pipeline is going to be low. I know they're focused on really making sure they're prepped for any kind of discovery call. They're doing advanced research. They're writing down the questions that they want to get down. They're lining up their success stories of comparable, like-minded, similar clients you've had successes, so they can go back and forth. They're lining up reference calls in advance. I know that they're analytical. They're always studying the numbers and how things are turning out, and often not just their numbers, but also marketing's numbers or product development schedules and feature set. And they're expressing their opinions to those people on what they need from them. And they're facilitating conversations to the prospects or customers to back up the point they're trying to make. Because again, they know if I have this feature, that opens up a whole new adjacent market for me that I can then go chase that I can't chase today. So over and over again, what I see is a singular focus. What I don't see in a high-performing sales rep is I don't see them just being willy-nilly and just like, oh, I'm going to do some emails for a while. Oh, I'm going to get a LinkedIn for a while. Oh, I'm going to get a Slack for a while. I don't see that ever. And I don't see them staying just to themselves. I'm a salesperson. I'm heads down. They're working with they're moving the pieces on the board. Again, if it's marketing, product marketing, development, if it's the CFO, whatever it is, they're making the pieces come together so that they can be successful. So that's what I see in terms of a high-performing sales rep. I got to ask Mike, did any of that ring a bell, or am I out to lunch?
No, you nailed it. I mean, they're the owner operator inside their territory.
Nailed it.
They're the owner operator inside their territory. So they need to know, what resources do I need to allocate in certain places? Where do I need to spend time? Where do I need to spend money? Where do I need to spend energy? And how does that align with being able to drive the numbers that I'd mentioned a little bit earlier? And a lot of times the categories fall into things like generating demand.
Yep.
I know some people will say, hey, that's a marketing function, or I need better leads or whatever. No, I mean, as a rep, if you're dependent on marketing to your family,
Agreed.
you're the wrong rep. So, and you look at that demand that's generated from the business as something that adds to what you're doing. So there's this demand gen component. There's the acquisition component, and acquisition requires project management. You're project managing deals that you're working on. So there you're building a plan, you're calling people to action, you're holding them accountable to hitting on those next steps, both yourself and them as you move through it. And then if you happen to be on the retention and expansion side, then what you're doing is you're hunting within existing accounts, because expanding accounts typically retain. I've only had one instance where I've seen a growing account not renew, and that's a story for another day. But like you can organize your work into certain areas. And to hit on a couple of the points that have been brought up so far, when you block time, defend that time. Like, that's up to you. That's up to you and your discipline to make decisions and block the time and shut your phone off, or if someone, or figure out what you're going to do to help stay focused, as Darryl was talking about, in that area to get your job done and then move on to the next, because there will be no shortage of distractions. You'll get pulled in 8 different directions. I mean, heck, I could spend half a day just doom scrolling on LinkedIn or Twitter, like how effective is that? But it can waste my time. It can spend it. So yeah, no, Darryl,
And it's funny you mentioned time. I wanted to come back to that. I know I said focus, but like, they're ruthless with their time in the sense of, if you're using up I'm the rep and you're coming to me with a question and it's not germane to what I'm doing, or you're just dicking around, or you're just talking about the game last night, I'll be polite. Yeah, thanks. But boom, I got to go. It's focus. And that's what I see. And they're also, the last thing I'll add to that is they're very self-aware. So in the sense of what I mean with that, they know their strengths and weaknesses usually. They know their constraints. So for example, let's say the kids come home from school at 4:00 and now it's going to be shot till 7 with homework and whatnot, dinner. They will, even though the day may go theoretically to 5:00 or whatever, or 5:30, they may say, okay, I'm done because this is going to be too much of a distraction here at home. And I'll pick up again at 8 at night when the kids are in bed, and I'll work for another hour and a half, uninterrupted.
Right.
Because that's the right investment of my time. So high performing reps, oh man, they are the cops of their own time clock.
The 4 pillars from a skill perspective for me, it's gathering data, conducting research, so the ability to ask questions, which gets into that curiosity piece. Leveraging story, understanding characters, transition, success, failure relative to the people you work with. Time management, which is ultimately about decision making, and project management. And those 4 pillars, if you give me a sales professional who's willing to hone in and develop those skills, they will be the best sales professional inside your organization. If they do not appreciate any of those 4 things, they're screwed. And I'm not going to use a curse word like Darryl did because I'm clean. But yeah.
So Chris, can you jump in?
Boring.
Can you jump in on some final thoughts on, what does a day look like for a salesperson who's effective and using their time well and delivering results?
I mean, I think they're all going to look a little different. Depends on what you have going on. But I mean, I want people focused on if they've got deals that are, I'll say in the later stages, that's where they should be focused, right? But you also have to do some level, I think, not necessarily every single day, but certainly every single week, some form of pipeline building. I think it's real easy when you have a decent pipeline and you've got things, a lot of activity that are, I'll say, good activity. It's real easy to cut the prospecting because it is painful work sometimes. But I think you have to do it every single week. And I always look at it as, at the end of the year, let's say you're not going to have 52 of those, but you should have 45 weeks where you've accomplished those types of things. And that's sort of the standard that I set for the main activities that I have to get done. I'm not going to guarantee that every single one of those is going to happen every single week because I'm going to take vacation. There's going to be emergencies that come up or other things that take priority. But at the end of the year, I want to be able to look at it and say, 45 out of 52, I've done this activity that I know leads to success. And that's what I would expect a high performing salesperson to be able to say, hey, these things that I know work and that we can point to the results for, I make sure I consistently execute on those things. And the other things aren't as important.
Okay. Any last thoughts on this high performing salespeople?
Well, I haven't really heard this one said specifically, but I do believe all those things that everybody said is pretty common over what I've seen too. But Liz, this is something you talk about a good bit with sales, that there's a lot of neurodiversity in salespeople. That's part of why they're attracted to the position. The role attracts a certain, some people, like you've pointed out, a lot of people in sales are dyslexic. A lot of people in sales have ADHD. Because of that, what one highly successful salesperson does can be very different from another highly successful salesperson. So I think that's really important for people to remember when they go in and particularly say like a first time, like maybe a CEO that hasn't really had to oversee sales before directly, or a first time sales manager, to remember that piece and not try to micromanage how, but micromanage what. So like, what are the outcomes, those sorts of things.
So I think that the bottom line is a couple of things. One is good salespeople are consistent and they're persistent and they're focused, right? They know what they need to do and they're doing those activities. I think a second really important thing is that whatever we think salespeople do as non-sellers, we really need to understand better what that is. What does it feel like and look like to pick up the phone and do a cold call? What does it look like and feel like to follow up? How many phone calls? How many times does somebody have to follow up with the same person who's interested to get them back on the phone again? What does travel feel like? How do you get all the work done? How do you get your prospecting and everything done when you're traveling? What is it like to go to a trade show? And then what's your responsibility before, during, and after a trade show? And how do you catch up after all that has happened? And you've still got other clients you need to deal with. There are all of these things happening. So if a salesperson is struggling with trying to get everything done, I think it's really important, if we're going to build a team that understands sales, they need to understand our job, but we need to understand their job as well and understand that it is really different than what most other people in the company do every day.
I have to say this one. I've been waiting to see if any one of you brought this up. When you said, what is it people don't like to do? And when you've all been talking about what are the things that successful people do, does anybody want to guess what I haven't heard a single time that I can't believe I haven't heard? Updating the CRM.
That's everybody's favorite.
Talking about that they do. Nobody updates the CRM.
Well, can I tell you how bad? I have a Google form that I fill out, and then my assistant puts it in the CRM, because that's how much I hate working in my CRM.
That's why I was like, when you said calling the top of the funnel, I was like, I think it's the CRM, but
You are. I think that you win. Yes.
What you need is someone to come in and help you build out that CRM that actually is integrated into the workflow of the people that are inside your business and are not overly complicated, created by some operator who operates behind a laptop.
Well, this is why I brought it up right after Liz says we need to have empathy for them and how they do their day, because often how people build the CRM is how we want information, right? We're building it for our reporting, our dashboards, our forecasting, our whatever, right? But because Liz brought up having the empathy for how they spend their day, that's the place I find the biggest mismatch.
So I think that is a really good moment to wrap up this episode of the Sales SOS podcast. And I think next we should talk about supporting your sales team, strategy, tools, and compassion, because I think it really ties into what we've just been talking about. So join us in the next episode. If you're with us live, please stay with us as we go into the next episode. Thanks, everyone, for joining us.
And that's a wrap for this episode of the Sales SOS podcast. A huge thank you to our experts for throwing us a lifeline with their insights. We hope that episode has equipped you to navigate sales leadership with confidence. Never miss an episode. Subscribe to your Sales SOS podcast on your favorite platform. If you have questions, comments, or topics you'd like us to explore, join us live on LinkedIn every second Friday, or share your questions on LinkedIn or YouTube. Until next time, keep sailing toward your sales goals.